Hey, welcome to Lead Full. My name is Chesley Lunday. I am your host today. Here's the deal. We know that life, no matter how successful you are, can sometimes be an exercise in futility. And we want to help you defeat futility in your lives. We want to help you develop fulfillment, and we want to help you change the world, because we know this: when leaders are fulfilled, they fill the world with hope. Now, let's get ready to lead full. Hey, welcome to the Lead Full podcast. I am your host, Chesley Lunday. I am excited for today's interview. We're going to interview Jesse Ross. We're going to talk about his Go Be Foundation. He's the founding director of that, where he deploys thousands of organizations and groups of people to be like a housewarming party for veterans. He also does speaking with other places like Catalyst West and the Q Commons, and he is getting ready to launch his Dream Wide book. And we're going to talk all about that in this interview. Stay tuned. Well, we got Jesse Ross here with us today. Thank you for joining us, man.
It's good to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we got to hang out. You were at Starbucks. I say hang out. We were doing it digitally, but and we had.
I think I'm addicted.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I got my BlackRock, so I go every day. So BlackRock is only on the West Coast, though. Do you when you lived in Cali, did you have that? No,
I've never heard of BlackRock.
It must be a Pacific Northwest thing. So yeah, they're quickly taking over the world. Like as Starbucks starts to go to drive-through, BlackRock is like, hey, we'll take your spot.
Let's do it.
Yeah, man.
Well, it's funny. I kept this cup in my fridge the other day, and this is actually my own home brew. So, yeah,
you're cheating. Is what you're doing.
If it's cold brew coffee, I'm in.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. So cool. Tell us, tell us your story. Tell us what you're doing. We would love to hear that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, I, like you, I've been in ministry for a very long time, official, pastor, staff. I grew up in a very fundamental denomination, a really hardcore conservative Baptist church. And pretty much kind of rejected that at a pretty early age, I was like, yeah, that's not really for me. And, I, kind of grew up in a small town in the mountains of Colorado and craved to be out of small town. And, that took me to Los Angeles, where I went and got my master's degree in the seminary there at Azusa Pacific University. Yeah. And man, I just fell in love with Los Angeles. My wife and I, we met in Colorado and moved together, and we stayed there 17 years and just really became part of the community. Just learned so much. LA is one of a kind, Los Angeles, and but it was such a good experience for me and for her. And we were there 17 years, and I was a teacher and in a public school in a poor neighborhood. I just learned so much there. I felt like I learned more there than I did in seminary. Just being on the streets, being in a public school where, in Azusa, where, the amount of people who are just below the poverty line is just unbelievable. And so I got an education, trying to give an education and get it at the same time. So that was a great experience. But so we did that, and I was on staff at churches. I was on staff at some really large mega churches, and some that are very, known worldwide, and just saw the good and the bad and learned a lot. And, here I am now. We're in Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm not on staff. I'm not in a ministry role formally, but taking all of that knowledge and all of those experiences and really trying to do something good with it. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So 2 questions for you. The first one is, where at in Colorado?
Okay. Durango. Have you heard of Durango?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people have. Why do you know Durango?
So I used to live in Salida.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and Pueblo West. So we played those guys
Wow.
in basketball and football back in the day.
What? That
Yeah.
is crazy.
And then you have to
What?
go through Durango to get to Phoenix, Arizona from Nebraska. So
Oh,
when we moved here, I had to drive through Durango to get here, anyways. But yeah, it was just
wow.
yeah. So
I
I
mean,
was there.
that's yeah, you probably had to go over some mountain passes, huh? Those like Wolf Creek and Red Mountain or anything, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I so we yes, you do that once you're like right before you get to Durango, and then it opens up a little bit, and then yeah, you go through the pass
Got
to
it.
get to
Yeah.
get into the desert.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then did you ever drive through the Navajo Indian Reservation
You know,
much?
um
Probably not,
I
huh?
was driving, and by the time I got out of Durango, because I stopped for dinner, it was dark. So I maybe,
Got it. Yeah.
but I don't
Yeah.
know.
Maybe. Yeah. Didn't know. Yeah.
So
That was a unique experience. Durango is a tourist destination.
yes,
There's
it
the
is.
ski resort there called Purgatory.
Yep, yep.
And it's a beautiful place, expensive to live there. And but I grew up poor. Like, I mean, Durango was kind of a different experience for us. I never got to go skiing at Purgatory. The passes were too expensive.
Yeah.
But then you drive in 45 minutes, and you're in Navajo Indian Reservation area, and it was just that was quite an experience. But
I
yeah,
bet.
Durango was home until I was 23,
That's
24.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Salida was very much the same way.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It was very expensive. We were poor. My dad was on a staff at a startup church,
Wow.
and then he was bivo, so he's bivocational. So he had the church job, but then he owned his own painting company. And
Wow.
yeah, so I grew up pretty broke, and
Wow. Yep.
you have
Yep.
Monarch ski pass there, and all my friends would go ski
Small
and
world.
snowboard on the weekends, and
Yeah.
you're out like working with dad trying to put food on the table, and so and then
Painting.
yes, painting. So
Wow.
then I went in the military and started my own painting company, but this isn't about me. So this is about you. What are you doing now? That's the question I have for
Yeah.
you next. What are you doing
Yeah.
now in South Carolina of all places?
Yeah. Towards the end of our time in Los Angeles, it was just starting to wear on us. The pace of life, the cost of living. My wife's a nurse practitioner. She makes more money than I do,
Yeah.
and both of us working full time, we could barely afford, the house that leaked when it rained that we lived in, and had poor air conditioning. So, and there was also a drought at the same time. We were ready for change. We've been there 17 years, but there was a multi-site church out here that's based in North Carolina that hired me to come out and launch a campus here in Columbia, South Carolina. And that lasted about a year and a half right before COVID,
Oh man.
and
Yeah.
shut down. Um, and we're just thankful because it brought us here. And I'm telling you, I never would have imagined living in South Carolina. I didn't even really think about South Carolina growing up. And we love it. We're closer to nature. Like I still, when I hear a bird, I stop and like look because I didn't hear those in Los Angeles.
Right. Unless there were pigeons crapping on your
Exactly.
car.
Yeah. And if you could hear
Uh,
them over the freeway right now, I was
yeah.
like, oh man. So yeah. So we just fell in love with it here. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I'm entrepreneurial at heart. And I'm not the person that you want to put on a church staff and say, here's this role, like with all these parameters. Now just keep that wheel turning and do it until you die. Like, man, I will die on day one,
Yes. And they
I'm
will
not that type
fire
of
you.
person.
Yeah, because you're not good at that job. Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like, I want to be creating. I want to be deconstructing and then reconstructing. I want to create the future. I'm not with the stagnant thing for me. So I am enjoying this process now. It is scary to be entrepreneurial. It's scary to step out of those comfort zones where all those things are, just kind of baked in. That's the trade-off is like, hey, I have job security, I have a paycheck that's regular, I have, health insurance, all these things. And it takes it, that was a, that's the leap really. But yeah, I just really have a passion for taking this idea. It's permeated into our church too, but I called it dream wide, and then we can talk about that. But that's the context. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am full on because I believe this to my core, pushing this message of dream wide. That's the name, the context for it.
Okay, so tell us what does it mean to dream wide?
Yeah. Well, it's a counter to the thing that we hear all the time, which is dream big, right? And
Yeah.
nothing wrong with dreaming big, but what that has come to mean, we have 8 billion people on this planet who are all dreaming their own big, best life. And we get so laser focused on our goals and our vision, our own church, our own company, our own politics, that we lose sight of everything that's on the peripheral of that vision, right? So, and I love to use that example. It was always told us dream big, put up a vision board for what you want to accomplish. And a lot of times those vision boards like had a Ferrari or, a big house, or maybe it's multiple campuses, and I want to plant a church everywhere in the whole world, and it was all these, we had these visions, and then we say now lock in, laser focus. And it's true, like, anything that's worth accomplishing, that's a big goal, you have to laser focus. But we lost the awareness. So what we did was we laser focused, and I call it laser burn. Like, we just burned everything that's in the peripheral vision, just like the horses that walk down the road like this. We lose sight of our family, we lose sight of our children, we lose sight of the community around us, we lose sight of the schools down the street that aren't functioning, and then we blame them. And it's led to a lot of disparities that we have, and it's hard for us to step back, take our eyes off of the ego, off of ourself, off of our own ambitious goals, and say, let me take a look and see what I've been neglecting. Let me take a look and see how maybe what I'm doing might be causing this, and could it be harming others, right? I mean, you look at corporations that will just plow through the environment just to get to their end goal. You look at people who plow through people like human beings just to get to their end goal. That's what I feel, that's in a nutshell what dream wide is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So the question I am thinking is, where has the church plowed through? What have they plowed through, and what does that look like? Because obviously you've been in the context of church. Now you're an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
My guess is some of my listeners, maybe many of my listeners, feel a little disenfranchised by
Mhm.
the what I would call the legacy model of church. What's been
Yeah.
done for the last 1,700 years.
Wow.
What Where have
Mm.
they plowed through people? What have they? What is the mission, the end goal? You were in the system, so talk about that. What does that look like from a church context?
Oh man, it's such a good question, because man, it could take on a lot of different forms, but I would say that plowing through people is a very common thing. And you said like the legacy model, that, or that we've done it this way, we're going to do it. But there's also, theologies and beliefs, things that we haven't even really questioned, and we haven't really deconstructed, that might just be a little off. And so we don't even give room for people to question, right? If you question theology, it feels really threatening. And so a lot of times we just plow through people in that sense, like, you know, um, if you're doubting something, we don't allow doubt. We don't have room for that. Like, are you backsliding? Are you not a Christian? Like, what's your problem? And there's that. There's also, we've kind of mimicked. I don't know if we're mimicking capitalism or if capitalism is mimicking us, but I think it's just one and the same. But a lot of times, we kind of use this, the excuse of evangelism, to have unchecked ambition and unchecked ego towards reaching big, like, and I was in it, man. I was like, there's nothing wrong with this bigness. It's like we're supposed to reach the world. And we just kept building this machine, and the machine, it's almost like it eventually it kind of takes over, and yeah, people are disposable resources. It's like, you can be on. I've been on staff at churches where I felt like I was on the show Survivor. Like, we got to pit people against each other, create competitiveness, like who's
Yeah.
going to rise to the top, and I felt like, man, where am I? I do not feel like I'm part of a community here. I don't feel, and there was pressure. There was this one pastor who was yelling at volunteers because the slide on the song was just a little bit slow on that song. So he's on there just yelling and, I think we just, yeah, the cart got ahead of the horse in a lot of ways. Does that kind of answer your question? Like
Yeah.
a couple examples.
Obviously, you were in that system for a while,
Mhm.
and something must have clicked inside of you that said, "This is not all it's cracked up to be." Like,
Yeah.
what happened? Like, why'd you change?
Yeah. Man, I think I started thinking, like, when's the first time it started? I remember being on staff at this very large church, and my wife and I both thought, man, we found it. This is it. Like, this is like gonna change the world. And, I was there for a couple years, and I remember standing there one day while the crowds were just coming in and out. We'd have 6 services a weekend and just fill this place. And people would just come in, and I started realizing that we are, we love crowds. We don't really like people. Like a lot of the pastors, like, we couldn't, you can only name the volunteers.
Hey, I'm interrupting this amazing interview because I want to tell you about something really quickly. I want to tell you about Followers Made. A lot of us have been in church for a very long time, and yet we are, we have problems because we don't exactly know what it means to follow Jesus. And it's not actually sitting in a pew or sitting in a seat listening to a preacher. It's actually developing the gifts and call that God has on our lives, and also developing intimacy with Jesus. Now, dudes, I know that word intimacy seems a little weird, but give it a chance. We want to help you develop your relationship with Jesus and develop the call of God that is on your life. And so we would love for you to text 480-531-9015 and do this for me. Text hello to 480-531-9015. I'm going to get back to you, and we would love to set up a time to show you what that system Followers Made looks like and how we might help you follow Jesus better in your context.
Years that you got to, like, get under your ministry, but we were so happy to see the crowds, but I felt a disconnect, and I think that might have started it. But then I think that sometimes when you do get to see behind the scenes, and I know that there's no one who's perfect, and there's a lot of grace that we can give towards people, but there was some things that are just like, no, this isn't okay. Like, there's a lot, I think, I don't know why, I don't know if I was attracted to it somehow, to churches that were very, there's a lot of nepotism, this was like a family dynasty.
Yeah.
And you were exposable and expendable, right? And you could sense that that they're protecting this, almost like they're protecting their livelihood, their entire family. Not only are all their kids on staff, their grandkids are getting involved. Like, it's like if anything was to break down, like, this will destroy us. And so there was a lot of things put in place where it started to feel almost like the mob. There was a lot of controlling language. There was a lot of it just wasn't healthy. and I think that's kind of maybe one of the starting points.
That's
Of
right. You
kind of
were
saying,
you were at a church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm trying to think back. So I'm from Tulsa,
yeah,
and for those of you that are my listeners that have no clue what we're talking about with church, you're getting to hear a little bit of the underbelly of the
yeah,
church industrial complex, right?
yeah, yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
I can almost guarantee you I know exactly which church you're talking about. So
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's a lot of that issue there. Yeah.
yeah, it is, and I think that they, I kept thinking like there was a couple times where I would, I resigned and I went on staff somewhere else, and I thought, oh, this is it, and then it was like, no, I think they're very, it's very, like you said, that it's you can pretty much find the same thing once you kind of uncover the wrapping,
Yeah.
but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think churches are really finding their way, and whenever something challenges the status quo, it's really hard for them to sit with that and to listen. And I think we talked about this when I first met you, but uh, we aren't really connected with the world outside of us. And we'll say like, hey, we're going to get involved, we're going to do things in the community, but what I found is that we're only involved with people outside of the church to the extent that they will be involved with us,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of times we called them secular, and we felt like what we were doing was more important. And, people that are doing great work in the community, since they weren't doing it through the church or our church, it was like, no, but we'll create a program and then we want you to be involved with it. And if you're not, there's no relationship. And
Wow.
that's, yeah, the ego, the religious ego is very strong. And it seems unfortunately that the bigger you get, the the harder it is to break down the ego.
Yeah. So what obviously there was something about church that attracted you that kept maybe it was like, hey, maybe I can change this from the inside. I don't know.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a beauty there that you're like, hey, there's something here
Yeah.
and I don't want to just give that up. What was that?
Yeah. When when I was growing up in that fundamental hardcore Baptist church, and it was a lot of rules, it was a lot of systems, a lot of fear based, um, but at 7 years old, I was sitting in the back of church, and I don't even remember what the message was. It wasn't even, I think it was just, they were talking at the end. But so I had an encounter with the divine. Like I had an encounter with God, and it wasn't fear based. It wasn't like, I don't want to go to hell, I want to
Yeah.
go to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't pressure from friends. And I remember I've been at like camps where, I had friends telling me like, "Hey, I'll buy you a Snickers if you go forward," and
Mm.
I was like, "Man, that's weird." Like, no, I don't, I'll get my own Snickers, thanks. But this something hit me, and I was like crying. I'm a 7-year-old boy, and my friends are sitting next to me, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be cool. This isn't. But I felt the love of God. Like it was almost like I could audibly hear Him, which I didn't, but it was felt like I just knew that you are loved unconditionally, and it was. I mean, that has been my foundation. So whenever there's the rejection of the other, and you're not following along, and we're going to cast you out, or the laser burning of people and things, man, I think I sense it in right away. Like and I feel that. But yeah, because of that experience, I was really passionate about I really felt like I got my undergrad in exercise science, and I became a teacher with a minor in history. And I was thinking I want to be a coach and a teacher because I my dad was a pastor too, and I didn't really want that life. And it sounds like your dad too.
Yeah.
They weren't the glamorous mega church pastor that had, people picking up at the airport.
Oh
We couldn't even
no.
afford to fly. Like
Yeah.
my dad, it was the 2 a.m. Phone calls from families going out chasing drunk bachelors and
Yeah.
all that stuff. I was like, man, I don't want to do that,
I
right?
had the
Is
high
that how?
water Gen Z jeans before they were cool,
Exactly,
just because we couldn't
exactly.
afford them. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
getting home one day, and my mom's like, "Why are you sagging?" We don't sag in this house. I'm like, I'm sagging so it looks like I have a regular pair of jeans.
Yeah, exactly. Because this has been through like three other people, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
oh,
I feel you,
hand-me-downs,
bro. I
man,
feel you.
hand-me-downs. Yeah, we'd get a box of Lost and Found and go through it like we were at Nordstrom, and I
Oh,
mean
don't.
that was our life, man.
Uh,
And worked on it. We
yeah.
actually worked on a farm. There was a guy in the church that had a farm, and we worked there all summer just to get meat from like one of his cows. Like that
Mm,
was, I mean, I remember being like, dang, I was saving up for a bike and I thought I'd get paid, but at the end it was like, where'd the money go? And Dad said, well, he gave us half a cow, and I was like, oh my gosh, like
yeah, that's
that's pretty
good.
bad,
Yeah.
But that was life, But anyway, yeah, that was my experience in church. So I was trying to kind of avoid it, but something kept
Kind
pulling.
of like avoiding the plague or COVID. I will
Oh
quarantine
man.
myself from this. Yeah, no, I
I
get
was
you.
like, no, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I even got a job at a bank and
Mm,
started moving up the ladder. I started getting
hmm.
into like loans and stuff. And I had this moment. I was like, man, I just don't think I'd be fulfilled. There's something missing. Even if I climbed the ladder a lot, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting my wife, and it was early in our marriage. I kept saying over and over, I feel like I just need to like get prepared or learn more about the Bible or something. And I kept telling her this, and she finally said, I hear you say that a lot. Why don't we just do it? And I was like, I never thought about just doing it. And that's when I
Mm,
applied, and we ended up moving to Los Angeles. But long story short, I mean, yeah, I really felt like, hey, getting involved in the church, the right kind of church, or maybe the right denomination, or the right, maybe that's where I can, create the most impact or be a part of this movement. And, so that's what, yes, you're right. That's what attracted me to it.
yeah.
So I went there. Yeah.
And so after after 17 years of doing the church ministry piece, it was like, okay, there's something more.
Yeah.
You call it laser burn, and so obviously this is the thing that I think people that don't well, I think a lot of my listeners understand that the church gets in a space where they say the if you're going to be all in on the mission of Jesus, you need to become a pastor.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's wrong. That's wrong.
Good.
And,
Absolutely.
and so that's where I would say we create this laser burn for
Hmm.
us, right? And
Hmm.
you call, it's like, and you get narrow. You
Yeah.
dream narrow, right? And so
Very narrow. Yeah.
I want to get into entrepreneurship and business and where you're at now. But before we go there,
Yeah.
paint a picture of what dreaming wide looks like in church.
Ooh. Oof. Man. I mean, to be honest, I'm still exploring that because I did try and think that, maybe I could change from the inside, change some things, right? And not that I know everything. I'm just like,
Yeah.
even simple things, for example, like you mentioned, the church world is just so insulated, and like we're so focused on our own vision, we're so focused on our own programs, and the ultimate, like we try to center everyone's life around what we're doing. And I remember being on staff at one church where almost every day of the week we wanted there to be something happening at the church. And because in people's lives, like, yeah, it's like if you weren't part of this church, you're going to lose community, you're going to lose friends, you're going to lose all of your activities, all your children are so attached to everything that's happening here. Your life evolves around it. And it's a little bit scary, but at the same time, it's taking us away from the everything else, the outside of the church.
Right.
I remember on staff, and I said, "Hey, I have an awesome idea. Why don't we highlight some of the people in our congregation that are doing incredible things in the community?" Like, and I met some people. I met this couple. They were like attorneys, high, like, U.S. attorneys, and they were like donating most of their time to the underserved and like helping in the community with, and they were doing incredible things. Then you have healthcare people, you have doctors and nurses, you have people who are working for like the United Way who are just killing it, like helping
Yeah.
people find housing, and man, they shot it down like with it was like they had a blank stare, and immediately it went to, let's have a volunteer fair for to get people involved in what we're doing here, right? And they started planning. Let's do that. Let's get highlight some of the volunteers that are doing great things here. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh man, this machine has lost its way. It is now, it exists now to exist. That's its main goal.
Yeah.
We have to exist and we have to thrive. We have to get bigger. And the like I said, man, the community and so many churches I was involved in right outside of our door was some of the biggest needs in the community, and we just ignored them because our thing was too important. So, and I forgot your question, but that is one of the keys is I don't know, like, and I started losing hope, and I felt like I had to get out. And then so I don't know if you know that when I was in Los Angeles, I started a nonprofit
Yeah.
outside of the church.
Yeah.
But but we still activate churches to get involved with, we move homeless people into permanent housing. When they get a voucher for an apartment and they've been homeless, we collect a welcome home kit and we move them in. And when I was doing that, sometimes I'd move someone in on a Sunday and I wouldn't go to church. And I was like, man, I just went to church. Like I am in this living room
Yeah.
with this grown man and his wife who have been living out of their car, and he's weeping and like praising God that they
Yeah.
have a home now. I'm like, man, I'm so thankful that I wasn't sitting in that chair at church today, because this was church, right?
Yeah.
So so but it was really hard to do that inside of it. I had to step outside of it. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to step outside of the church to make change. And I do think there's signs of hope. And I think your story and what you're trying to do, I think that that's going to be the challenge. Is like, here's what I tell people with the Dream Wide is we need to start creating goals and measuring outcomes, because we do that, right? I have goals, I measure my outcomes, I have milestones. We know how to throw a vision out and then plan and take steps to get to it. We're really good at it. But we're just always, so if we took a vision or a plan of something in our community, something, so I think if we start turning our vision out and start creating those kind of things. So in all of your goals and visions and outcomes, do any of them have anything to do with someone outside of you, someone outside of your organization, someone outside of your company? I think that might be one place to start. And I think most churches will say, we have an outreach pastor. Yes, that's what they do, like
Yeah.
we get involved in this and we've created this program. But yeah, that might be one step. But
Okay.
yeah, what do you think?
At the end of the day, the church is about equipping people for the work of the ministry. Now we have, so that's Ephesians 4, but we
Hmm.
have relegated work of the ministry to inside of a church building, and that's not actually what Paul was talking about.
At all. You're right.
And so obviously there are issues with that. And I think I'm going to, after our interview, I will unpack that piece, because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's so important to understand. When we read in America, equipping the saints for the work of the ministry, every American Christian thinks inside of the church building,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we as pastors have done a really bad job at explaining the original context of that scripture.
Yeah.
And so I think when I hear you speak, it's like we need to empower leaders for impact in their community.
Yes. Yes. Can I say this?
Yeah.
My wife has been a nurse practitioner, and she is incredible at what she does. She is the type of nurse practitioner that just, it's like her touch is healing. She, while in ministry all these years, except for like maybe a year or two where she actually stepped off ministry and came and worked at the same church together,
Yeah.
she's been doing that. But the whole time of all the 20 years in ministry, there was never a point where the church valued what she did. It was always like, it's said from the pulpit, almost like, yeah, like what we do here, every program, being in ministry is the ultimate. And here my wife is like, especially in this last year through this pandemic, I'm telling you, man, like she's running circles around pastors in ministry, like in terms of like ministering to people, like helping people through the last stages of life. And she's not just dealing with the person on the bed, she's dealing with the entire
Entire
family.
family, yeah, absolutely.
If she comes every day and tells me stories, and I was like, man, if every church would just dismantle and go out and work like that, like that's the kind of like that's the kind of work that needs to be done. But it was interesting, just to note that my wife, I asked her, and she's like, yeah, I actually sometimes felt like maybe I was out of God's will because I wasn't working at the church or in ministry. And isn't that crazy? Like,
Yeah.
I think that you're right. It's gotten so bad that people who are doing incredible things, they feel like it's second rate compared to the person on stage or someone who, they highlight people who gave up a good paying job. They gave up their big and God took a huge pay cut to be in ministry. Let's elevate them and praise them right now for that. And I was like, what did you do before? Oh, they were doing something incredible, working with the most incredible people in the community. And I'm like, man, that's sad now. And like me, when I got into the bubble of the church, at one point I was like, man, I feel like I'm working at a corporation. Like I could
Yeah.
go, well, I was in charge of like a media department, and I'm like approving, lights and cameras and, big screens, and we're just meeting deadlines and filming this announcements and doing that. And I'm just like, I could do this at Coca-Cola, I could do this anywhere. It didn't even feel like ministry.
Yeah, there is a way to be able to do church if they were supporting the people like you that are out in the community doing the entrepreneurial, what I would call kingdom work. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if you are starting a business and you're hiring people, like how are you being the boss? How are you caring for the people in their community? I heard one guy that was selling Cutco knives, like he went over to a person's house that had just lost their job, and he ends up giving the Cutco knife to the person for free, just to say, here you go, I know you can't pay for anything. Came out of there, and then he prayed for them, right? It's like, oh,
Dude.
that's an actual, you're actually making a real difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I saw a non-Christian person inside of the office of my church. Doesn't happen.
Wow. Exactly. I mean, I think one of the big wake up moments for me was in Easter when I was on a staff at a church in Brea, California. Very, very white, privileged,
Yeah.
lots of money. We're sitting there right before Easter, and it was like, hey, this is very typical. The pastor said, think about someone that that doesn't know God, and think about inviting them. And I was sitting there, and I was like, I don't know anyone right now. I don't have connection with anyone outside of this church. And I literally cried. I was like, where am I? Like, how did I get here?
Right.
How did I get here? And that's what led me to pretty quickly after that. It's almost like my eyes were opened. I was like, this is a subculture, and actually it's kind of cultish, especially where I was right there. It's very cultish. And I was like, I got to get out. And I got out, and we moved to downtown Los Angeles. We moved right onto the streets of the neighborhood. And that's what, when we started, Gobi, the nonprofit and
Yeah.
everything. And I was like, I got to get out. And I hope all my interactions now are outside of the bubble. But yeah, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. We talked
Yeah.
about church long enough, and I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of my listeners are like, "Yep, that's the reason why we left." No, and I have a message for those people because they do need to be a part of us, the community of believers, right? So there is a conversation to be had there, but. What does Dream Wide look like in the context of the people you're trying to reach?
Yeah. Well, especially today, I mean, we have a lot of people who are having to reinvent themselves. And so a lot of people, who have lost jobs and gone through this pandemic, or they're starting something over or having to restart, There's just now is the time to, if you're down to a place where you have a foundation now, to start building again, now is the time to think about dreaming wide. And if you think about this in practical terms, if you build a if you just start building big, eventually it's going to become unstable, right? It's actually, like you said, very narrow. And if you look at buildings, I mean, that's why foundations are always bigger, the foundations are deeper. But a lot of us just say, "Oh, I need this big vision. Now I'm gonna lose sleep and I'm gonna hustle and I'm just gonna go after it." And pretty soon it's unsustainable. It's burning you out, and you're losing sight of everyone around you. So when you start to build something, and now is the time. Let's start with a wide vision. Let's start with a wide foundation and start. I would even think I'm going to do this. And I know that creating a business plan isn't really a popular thing anymore because things are changing so fast. They say
Yeah.
if you create a business plan, get ready to wreck it in 5 days. But if I would like to create kind of a business plan to start with that starts involving some things like, you know, how's what you're doing going to impact here, and some of those things like creating some goals and visions for things outside of it. But yeah, so I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm talking to business leaders, and sometimes churches, if they'll have me, because some of them aren't ready to hear it yet. But yeah, that's kind of who I'm talking to. But it doesn't. You don't even have to be starting. Sometimes a lot of people, especially even in Silicon Valley, like it's kind of a thing where people can reach a high level of success and have, man, they look on paper like they did everything right. It got big. They have the money, but they've lost relationships. They're burning out. The money is not fulfilling. And they're kind of like, I thought this was it. And that's the person I'm talking to as well. Is like, this is what happened, and this is how, that there's change. There is hope. The future is wide. The future is not narrow. But a lot of us, it's a common human thing. Like we're just looking out for number one. I need to survive. If I think about other people and I care about these things, like it's going to take away from what I'm doing. And that's the whole point. This is actually straight from scripture. It's not just a spiritual discipline, it's a secret to success. Is if you want if you want to have good friends, you have to be friendly.
Yeah.
You can't buy them, right? If you want, or hire them, if you want a great relationship, you need to prioritize your partner. If you want a good business, you need to prioritize your customers. It's not about you. The more that we look in about my needs and you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. So
Yeah.
I have this mantra that if you commit to the success of others, everyone succeeds, including you. And that's a hard place for people to get. We have believed in this Darwinian kind of a thing that like it's the big dogs, you need to kill or get killed. Like, go out there in business and just be a shark and yeah, I mean, there's people out there that are succeeding that way, but I can guarantee you the personal life, the joy, the all these other things that are coming at a high cost.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about what you're talking about, and you're definitely talking about switching from building your own empire to helping other people, in a way, not
Yeah.
really building theirs, but like I think you're
Yeah.
like, hey, get your eyes off yourself, start
Yeah.
looking at the things that are outside in your world. What problems can you help solve? Am I catching that
Yeah,
correctly?
it's a little bit of both, and I
Okay.
think that's where I have to really delineate is that yes, there is an element of, widening your vision a little bit because my heart is like we create so much disparity unknowingly
Yeah.
because the capitalistic drive is just like, look, win at all costs, and we have to stop that train because we are winning at losing our own soul. Like a lot of
Yeah.
us are, the cost of us winning is just it's not a good trade-off.
Yeah.
You know, the environment is suffering. You know, there's racism
Yeah.
because, you know, we start blaming, we start othering, and we're not looking. And so there's that element, but there's also an element of, you know, look, if you want to succeed, this is how, like, you know, this is a secret. This is a secret to success, although it's not really a secret. But you know, and I think it's really hard, like, to think, wow, prioritizing others in business. And some people have done a great job, and I love sharing examples. Like, let's take Patagonia. Do you know
Yeah.
Patagonia?
Yeah. Yeah.
Clothing company, right? They're just hardcore. Look, it might cost a little more up front, but you know, their customer service, the way they treat their employees, they're the type of company, I think that they have 600 and something applications all the time. People,
Wow.
they have no turnover
Wow.
because they prioritize their employees to the point that it does feel like home. It feels like family.
Yeah.
You know, and they do the same to their customers. And if something rips, you just send it in and they'll fix it. You don't want you to buy a new one. I mean, there's just, you know, there's people that and you would think like they're doing it all backwards, and it's just proven over and over that it's actually the way to do it, you know.
So that's interesting, because an entrepreneur like you would say most of the time would be like, hey, capitalism is important, right? So and there's an underbelly to capitalism, and there's also the underbelly to the other piece. But I don't hear, as an entrepreneur, you're saying, oh, that one's good too. You're talking like when I'm talking, like, you got capitalism, communism, socialism, you're talking about a third way. You're not talking about a polarity between the two.
Yeah.
You're talking about something uniquely different.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, third way. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I was just talking to someone recently today about that, is that, you know, there's little bits and pieces of, you know, capitalism and this, and there's bits and pieces of these other systems that maybe work in the right context. And I don't know, I don't endorse, you know, like, hey, this is it. But you're right. There's a lot of harm and a lot of damage that can be done in all of those. But there is this thing that, like, here's the point, I think, and this is that what I'm really trying to do too is help people, like, identify what is healthy ambition.
Yeah.
And how do we keep our ego in check? Like, this is interesting. I think you've probably done this in ministry as long as you've been in. I know you have. I've done just about every personality test there is out there. Like, we love being aware of what my personality type is. I've done the DISC, I've done the Myers-Briggs, I've done the Berkman or whatever that's called. I've done, and I can't even keep track of them.
Yep.
And I stopped remembering. People are like, well, what's your you know, your Enneagram? I'm like, I don't remember. I don't. I've taken so many.
I'm a 14. I'm a 14. No.
Yeah. I'm a 14.
Hey, dude, there's only 9 numbers. No.
That's funny.
Yeah, no.
That's probably what I would say.
Yeah.
And but we love measuring personality and being aware of it. And then we also can measure IQ. So we have IQ. We can measure emotional intelligence. But there's nothing out there that I've found that, and it's not something we talk about, is how do we measure and become more aware of our ego? And to me, it's the most important piece, because I know a lot of brilliant people,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of emotionally intelligent people that when the ego takes over, man,
They're
and
smooth
they become-
politician. Yep.
Oh, I'm telling you, they will die even knowing they're wrong,
Yeah.
just to protect their ego. And they
Yeah.
become the most, I mean, you're intelligent, but you are acting a fool. Like, that to me is one of the main problems. Is so I'm not like a Harvard student, but I'm working with some people to create some kind of a way where we can actually measure and become more aware of our ego, drive, our ambition.
So some guys that I work with, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to cut you
Oh, I
off.
was gonna say, no, I'm good. I was just saying how healthy or unhealthy it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's some guys that I work with that kind of did this thing to me. The Bible already has this. It's called the fruit of the Spirit, meaning you take time with Jesus, you change. And so you got these 9 categories, right? Nine. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah.
9.
Yeah.
They're like, you just put up 8 fingers. No, yeah, 9 categories that you can almost quantify. That's what's happened. We've quantified people. We haven't qualified people. And qualified means how are you doing in these 9 areas? That I can know because those 9 areas are the byproduct of your relationship with God. So love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, long suffering, self-control, like there's a couple more, but you quantify those. You could do that 1 through 10,
Yeah.
How am I doing
Yeah.
self-assessment wise? How am I doing in loving? And then here's the kicker. We love our friends. That's not what Jesus told us to do.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah,
told
exactly.
a bunch of racist Hebrews to love the Samaritans and the Romans,
Yeah.
whom
Yeah.
they despised.
Yeah.
And he gave them a qualification of what love looked like. Like, if they ask
Yeah.
you to go a mile, you go 2. If they ask for your shirt, give them your coat. If they are on the side of the road, don't ignore them. Care for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Serve them
Yeah.
to the point of death. That's what love is.
Yeah. And if we, so like there's 9 of those, and then creating some more than ranking, but some kind of ranking, but also asking a lot of questions to get to that. Yeah, like how, I think the one thing that worries me is that, again, I said it earlier, but the religious ego is the hardest, I think, because we're so convinced that we're right. We're so convinced that what we're doing, some of us will fight and argue thinking that we're defending the faith as if God is like, someone defend me, please, and we're out there doing that. But we would say, oh, I am so righteous and holy and I'm doing this, but we're so unaware, our religious ego and our need to be right. And that I think that's the part that we have to take the hammer and chisel and be like, wait a minute, like, are you even listening to someone's story? And can you at least just validate, even if you don't agree, like treat them like a human being and don't just come and start, colonizing them with your view of what's right and what's, correct. And I think that's the hard part, because most people, a lot of pastors that are doing a lot of damage, they keep just telling themselves, but look how many people came last Sunday, There's almost like, I say this, we would think the ends justifies the means, and I keep saying actually the means, the way you're doing it and who you're being is actually unjustifying the ends. We're not creating disciples, we're creating, I don't want to get political, but January 6th was to me the result of discipleship. That it's working exactly the way that people have been discipling. Like they're worshiping and they're carrying crosses in that day. And I'm like, who are these people? And they're all coming out of these churches.
That's
That's
a really great indictment of everything.
Sorry.
You're good.
My bad. I'll back up.
No. That's good. So So first off, my friend Brian Phipps, who we had on the podcast right before you, he's the guy that taught me the whole God gives us the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit for character and for calling. And what you're talking about is very much character and calling together, infused. Yeah. So there are some of us that are carrying that message, and I'm super excited about that. Secondly, that whole piece of discipleship, we are perfectly designed for the results we are getting. And I'm pretty sure the first time I heard that was Pastor Chris Hodges. I don't have an original idea, so
I don't think we.
But
context. Yeah,
you're not wrong, and so we've got to shift that. And I think guys like you that are beginning to go, hey, I'm not going to be in the 4 walls of the church because that's not where real ministry happens. Yeah, that's important, and then teaching other people that's also important. So, as we wrap up, what would you like to tell entrepreneurs out there that are or leaders out there, even not just entrepreneurs but leaders that are missionally discontent like you? What sort of encouragement or exhortation would you have for those guys as they go through this process?
Yeah, man, I'll answer it with that one short motto, and then I'll say something after. But I would just say to write this down and think about it, meditate about it, think, is that phrase, commit to the success of others and everyone succeeds, and that includes you. And I think that's really important because there's a lot there. And there's that passage, that says to prefer others before yourselves, right? There's the love your neighbor yourselves. And a lot of times we think, oh, that's just that. It's like a spiritual discipline. I need to practice that because I'm supposed to, I'm a Christian. I should, but it's I'm telling you, it's a key, and it's something that we need to sit with. And so I think that's important. And I'm telling you, as an entrepreneur, that's a key thing. Prioritizing. So and man, this is cool. In software development, I got to design some software. When we started the nonprofit, we had so many volunteers, and we started realizing that United Way and the city of Los Angeles were all having the same problem. And there was no software out there that could manage and large amounts of volunteers, in one place.
Yeah.
And so we started building it, but I got to learn so much. And one of the things that they're doing, they call them, I can't remember the exact name, user experience and user interviews is such a key thing. It's a
UX
key to
and UI.
building.
Yep.
UI, yeah. To build something, you can't just be like, I have this vision, let's go build it. Because you build something and then it's not even really connecting with people. And that's what we do. We think, I have this vision, I'm going to go do this, and I'm building this company and I'm trying to sell this. But we never actually stopped and committed, like, all right, let's take some customers. What's your name? Who are you? Where do you live? Why do you, what's your need here? How can I help you? I'm telling you, that's a key. And companies that start doing that are like, boom, it's changing everything. So commit to their success and you will succeed. But I'm just saying too, like, it's not just for the end goal. And that's where it gets backwards too. It's like, you don't sit there and say, I want to be a billionaire. I guess I need to start caring about my customers. No, like, anyway, but that's a key. I would just encourage people to do that, and it will get you out of the cycle of disparity. A lot of us were like, we just are frustrated, we're stuck, and it'll get us into a different cycle where you start to come alive. You start to like want to meet customer needs and care about people, and you want to make a difference. Like, hey, I didn't even know that there were so many of our customers that are teachers, and some people will start to like adjust even who they are in order to meet a need that's there. And I'm telling you, if you tie these things together, it will build a culture. Even if you have employees, or if it's you, it'll light it up. It'll start a fire that will be hard to put out.
That is amazing. Well, Jesse, thank you for being a part of us today, like giving us your wisdom. And Dream Wide, I think, is something that I will. It'll be like, hey, commit to the success of others, right? And it'll be quote Chesley Lunday ... quoting Jesse Ross. No, I'm just playing. Hey, where can we find you, man? Where can we find you online if we want to connect with you?
Hello Jesse Ross is all the social media handles. Just Hello Jesse Ross, spelled JESSEROSS. And it's actually there's a website, hellojesseross.com, and that's probably the best place, because that'll just start to unpack a little bit. And then I'm going to be following your footsteps and launching a podcast soon called the Dream Wide Podcast.
Woohoo!
And actually looking forward to having you on as a guest. So that's going to be fun. Yeah,
we're gonna unpack all this stuff. It's gonna be great.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, man. All right, cool. Well, thank you, man. And guys, we would love to have you follow his stuff, so definitely do that.
Thank you, Chesley, and keep up the good work, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks, Jesse, for an amazing interview. Hey, I am getting ready to do my soapbox for today, and Man, Jesse talked about dreaming wide, and I don't know. I like reading my Bible. Some of you might like, that's archaic. That's okay. That's okay. But there's this story that I remember in the Bible. It was about the Tower of Babel. For those of you that have no clue about the Bible and the stories that are in it, I'll just give you a brief synopsis of what the Tower of Babel was about. So everybody on earth at this time had a common language. They all spoke the same language. They all had the same culture. They all thought the same way, and everybody came to an agreement, which is crazy, right? No, not three of us have a hard time coming to an agreement, let alone everybody on earth deciding the same exact thing, right? And so in this story, everybody has this idea of doing one thing together, and that was creating a high place, like building a tower to the heavens so that they could be worshiped as gods. And they get to work. They build it. And they are doing a good job of being in one accord, or being unified in this one purpose. That's what it means to be in one accord. And it says that God comes and walks between the men and looks at them. And it says that God looks at what they're doing and is deeply dismayed and disheartened that he even created God, because they were so wicked. You see, you got the creator of the universe that has created them for relationship. They rebelled against him, and now they're creating their own tower to the heavens to be worshipped as gods themselves, rather than the creator that created them, right? And so here they are building it, and so God decides to change their languages. So he said, if they don't get split up now and they don't scatter now, they will finish what they started. And so he goes ahead and he confuses their language, hence the name, the Tower of Babel. Yeah, that's where we get the word babbling from. Is from this story, the Tower of Babel. So they, at 1 minute, they are all communicating, and then they all communicate and can't understand each other, don't know what each other's saying. They get all confused, they get in fights, and they all head out their same direction. Funny story, etymologists who love language have traced back all the languages, all the known languages of the earth, and they said there are 8 subsets of language, and they can't reduce it to any less than 8. I wonder why. It's possible that the Tower of Babel had something to do with it. Now, is it a real story? I don't know. Is it just an allegory? It could be. Or, it could, something really crazy could have happened at one time, and we could have gotten 8 languages out of it. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is this. God talks about scattering, and the Tower of Babel caused all of these people to scatter and create. Back in Genesis 1, the thing that God told Adam and Eve to do, the first man and the first woman, was to rule the earth, to be fruitful and multiply, rule the earth, fill the earth and subdue it, bring it under your reign. And then you see they decide to stay in one place, and instead of scattering, God confuses their language, so they have no choice but to scatter because they don't know each other anymore. They now have to have different cultures because they have different languages. And then when Jesus comes some 5,000-6,000 years later, you see that he says the same thing in Acts chapter 1, verses 8. To go, therefore, into all the earth and preach the gospel, baptizing everybody in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He wants us to go and scatter. And so often what you look at in the American church is you look at how we create our big buildings. And buildings aren't bad. Don't get me wrong. Buildings are not bad. But when they take the place of idolatry in our lives, rather than worshiping God, we worship our organizations, and we build up and we build large and we don't build wide and to go viral in a network space. We're not doing what God calls us to do, which is to go out and spread. God wants each and every one of us to be using our gifts to rule and subdue the earth, to fill it and to reign over it. And the best way for us to do it is that each and every one of us has the ability to pull this off. And so we need to learn what it looks like to dream wide, to go wide rather than to go up. And I believe that if you look at the stories that are in the Bible, you see this principle at work. So the Jews who became Christians in the first century, they're in Jerusalem. It says that they are doing such a great job being a community that everybody in Jerusalem had heard the gospel of Jesus. And so they hung out, they had fun, and they stayed. And then comes the hammer, which is Saul of Tarsus, who later on becomes Paul and writes 2/3 of the New Testament. When he hit down on the church, he persecuted them and tortured them and killed them, and they scattered to all four corners of the globe at that time. When they took the gospel with them, they scattered. And I believe they scattered, God had them scatter through Paul because they wouldn't scatter by themselves. He doesn't want us to build up. He wants us to build out. He wants us to build wide. And I am thinking through that as an American citizen who loves business. I think if you look at the way to do commerce and business now, I think the profit and to build up has been the number one source of what we consider success. And I think legacy needs to be our measure of success moving forward. As business leaders, as leaders in the creative and innovative spaces, we need to begin to start thinking about what it would look like to help our employees, the people that God has given us to steward well, to manage them as they work and use their God-given abilities. And I'm looking at a business sector that really doesn't do that well. They don't even know, most employees go into their business, they get trained to do a specific job, and then that's it. They don't get poured into, they don't get developed as people. They're told to do one thing and one thing alone, and they don't even know how to make it up the ladder in their organizations. And so what if we were leaders who said, you know what, when you come on board with us, not only are we going to teach you these pieces, we're also going to teach you the character you need to have to make this organization a great place to work. But we're also going to teach you how to develop the calling that God has on your life. And whether you're a Christian or not, you don't have to use those words. But what if you actually helped people develop their gifts and their talents and their abilities and skills and gave them the opportunities to use them in their spaces? Most people don't want to leave an organization. They want to work there. They want to have fun. They want to build on a mission. And then there's some guys like me who just have to go start something, right? That's what we are called and wired to do. And what do you do with those guys if you're in a business? Well, first off, you have to shift your thinking. You can't be afraid of deploying people. You can teach them to develop their skills and gifts and abilities. And if you have a guy like me that is entrepreneur rather than intrapreneur, intrapreneur means working and building new things within an existing organization. Entrepreneur means building new things that do not exist outside of an existing organization. So I'm an entrepreneur. My dad is an intrapreneur. My dad wants to work within an organization to build new things. I want to go start new organizations, build new things. What could you do as a business leader to help someone like me and still get the ability for impact? Well, you have the opportunity to develop that skill and then invest in them. What if you became a leader that invested in 15 different businesses through your own business? This is not a zero-sum game. We keep thinking the scarcity mentality. Jesus didn't think that way. He thought in abundance. And when you have an ability to invest in others, guess what's going to come back to you? Rewards. Maybe it's monetarily. We need money to live. You need monetary rewards to keep your business running, to help employ more people. Yes, that's amazing. But you also get the legacy piece, the people you leave behind long after you're gone, the organization that has this culture to it. There is much bigger things at play than money, and money is only a part of a piece of the puzzle. It's only part of it. There's so much more out there that we could do. If we dream wide and we think about unleashing people's gifts, talents, and abilities, even in the marketplace, not just the church world, I believe we can make our world and our cities a better place. Hey, if you are listening, subscribe, rate and review us, subscribe to our podcast, rate and review us on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you're listening. And we know that if you're on YouTube, we'd love to see you subscribe, hit the subscribe button. Just, hey, let us know what you loved about this episode as well. Next week, we have John Mediana. He is an amazing marketer, has worked with guys like Andy Grammer and Gary Vee and other guys like Lewis Howes. He is an amazing guy. He also happens to be a Christian and is working with what it looks like to be a Jesus follower in the workplace. He is an amazing dude. He is gifted at what he does. In fact, I mean, media is in his last name, right? So he better be, right? And I'm so excited for the conversation that's happening with him next week. Hey, remember this, that you have the ability to help people reach their potential. You have what it takes inside of you to make a powerful impact on your communities and your city and your world. But the best way to do that without depleting the thing inside of you is to develop in fulfillment first. I believe that is through Jesus Christ. But for some of you that are like, I don't know. What I would say to you is that you need to develop fulfillment and learning how to be mindful and think through what it looks like to relate to the creator of the universe. I think all of us agree that there is something out there, and you could tap into that. Mindfulness is a great way to do that, and prayer is a great way to do that. But develop a fulfillment, and there are things like contentment and simplicity and solitude. Those pieces help us become fulfilled. And here's the deal. The reason why we want you to develop fulfillment is because only fulfilled leaders can fill the world with hope. And I believe that you can be one of those leaders. We'll see you next week.
Hey, don't forget to check out Jesse Ross and everything he's doing at gobetheone.com. Also, be looking out for his book, Dream Wide. Every week, we get together and we talk with amazing people that are making huge impacts in their community. Next week is John Mediana. I'm super excited about this interview, and we would love to see you there listening with us. Also, remember this. Every week, at the end, I'm going to tell you, only fulfilled leaders fill the world with hope. Because it's people like you that matter, that when they become fulfilled, they can go into their cities, find places that need hope, and they're able to deposit it there. Because you need to be filled to be able to pour out what is inside you. Otherwise, you're gonna pour out and you're gonna get depleted quickly. And so when we lead from fulfillment, we are not worried about depleting ourselves. We want to be hope dealers in this world, and we can only do that when we're fulfilled. Hey, thank you for listening to our interview today. We're so excited to be able to bring these to you weekly. If you'd like to stay up to date on our blogs, on our podcasts, even some of our social media, or if you would like to say hi to me, you can reach out to us at 480-531-9015. Again, that's 480-531-9015. We know that when leaders develop fulfillment in their own lives, that they begin to develop fulfillment in others. And when fulfilled leaders lead, they lead and develop hope. And the world needs a lot more hope. So here's the deal. We would love to see you next week, and let's lead full together.